Hey folks, Randy Wilburn. We're going to try this again. I think that my sound should be a lot better now. I redid things and I'm using a different microphone than I was using before because I just didn't like the levels that I was getting. It wasn't, I don't know, it didn't sound that great. So we're going to go ahead and get started now. I've got my Shure MV7. I'm using a different mic. We'll talk about equipment at another time, but I wanted to get back and talk about a subject that is very important to me. And it's one that, for design professionals, it should definitely be important to you. But I also wanted to just kind of qualify and quantify the power of a podcast network. I hope it's live streaming, but it may not be. I'm trying to see here what's happening. If it's not live streaming, then we'll just replay this at a later time on the Gable Media page, hoping that it's working. For some reason, I'm getting some issues or problems here. I don't know why that is. So anyway, we'll keep going. So I wanted to talk with you today about a couple of things. One is really the power of a podcast network. And, a lot of times we think about podcast network. There are tons of benefits, and there are a lot of organizations that have started podcast networks that have a lot of success. And so I think of like Gimlet, I think of Wondery, I think of HubSpot Network, right? And so the idea here is when you think of a podcast network, it's kind of like an aggregate of a lot of different networks that come together. And in a minute, I will share with you some of the podcasting work that we've done here at Gable. And I think it's important to kind of drive it home and help you understand the benefits of a podcast network. So when I think of like a podcast network, like I'm looking at this right here, you can look at the different podcasts that we have on the Gable Media network. And there's a little bit of everything here, from Build Smart to Build Brand Podcast, to Context and Clarity, Detailed, Design Vault, Emerging, Hidden in Plain Sight. I mean, just Mark LePage's Entree Architect podcast, which is kind of like the godfather of all podcasts in the design industry space. But there's something out there for everyone. And I think it's important for us to kind of understand that and the benefit from, why, these things, why these podcast networks can be so powerful. Today, my goal really is to make a case for you as to why you should consider doing a podcast network or being a part of a podcast network, because it can definitely benefit you in the long run in terms of, how you're able to extend your brand, how you're able to get your information out there and do all kinds of things as far as that's concerned. Just letting people know what you do, how you do it, why it's important to you. There's just a number of factors that play into the power of a podcast network and why it matters. So I'm going to make a case for that today. And hopefully you guys will get a chance to kind of see what I'm talking about and have a better understanding and feel for what this is all about. But I think you'll like this. So let's just talk a little bit about podcast networks and really the power of podcast networks. So if you think about it, for a design firm, if you are part of a podcast network, there are a ton of benefits to an architecture, engineering, and construction firm looking to enhance its visibility, thought leadership, and engagement within the industry. And here are some ways that joining a podcast network can be advantageous. And the reason why I'm talking about podcast networks today, because I'd like to talk about one thing and at a time. And that's why I do these live streams. And, the goal is to go live and to share some information with you about a different aspect of podcasting on a regular basis. But this podcast network thing is very powerful. And so I want to kind of break it down for you today and give you a better understanding of what that looks like. And so I've kind of put together just a little slide that I think will be really helpful for you as you follow along here. And as we talk about, putting a podcast network in place. And so when you think of a podcast network and you think of all the things that you want to do and accomplish. So the benefits, there are many, but we're going to go over 8 of them that I think really stand out and really make a difference when it comes to doing a podcast network. And the first is, wow, you get to do targeted audience reach with a podcast network. And so when you think of that, a podcast network focused on business, design, or the built environment would already have a listener base that aligns with the firm's target audience, right? So when you do a podcast, the goal is to develop a target audience that you want to reach out to, or you become part of a larger network like Gable Media, where you have the benefit of accessing a larger listening audience. Gable Media, we have listeners in over 100 plus countries. We've had over 3 million downloads, and more importantly, 200,000 regular listeners in the Gable Media podcast network. And so that's the power of the aggregation of sharing like-minded content, like-minded information with an audience that's constantly looking for that. And again, I'll go over some of the shows that Gable offers. But my encouragement today is why you should really consider a podcast network, especially how it benefits the architecture, engineering, and construction design firms looking to enhance their visibility, thought leadership, engagement within the industry. So we're going to kind of talk about some of these ways that you can do that and that you can benefit from this. So let's just kind of go through it. So the first one is a targeted audience reach, right? And so a podcast network focused on business design or the built environment would already have a listener base that aligns with the firm's target audience. This would include architects, engineers, designers, construction professionals, decision makers in the AEC space. And what the network can do is can help the firm tap into this audience, providing a more direct and efficient way to reach potential clients, partners, and industry peers, right? So with being part of a really solid podcast network, especially as a design firm, will give you access to potential clients, potential partners, and industry peers. And it's the thing that I've been saying over and over again about the power of a podcast is that, you do a podcast, you just don't know who's listening. And it really can make a huge difference if you can get your podcast out there and get some people listening to it. And remember what I said, when we talk about podcasting, I know a lot of you guys are thinking, I'm never going to have Joe Rogan numbers. I'm never going to be as big as Serial or The Daily. No, you're never going to be that big. Some of these podcasts get 1 million downloads an episode. I was listening to Andrew Huberman the other day. He's had almost 500 million podcast listens. That's a lot, right? And so we're not trying to be in that space. What we are trying to be is relevant in the space that we're in. And again, hence that's why I think there is a real power in building a strong podcast network. The second thing is enhanced thought leadership and brand, right? And so that's, when you think about brand positioning, by participating in a podcast network, an AEC design firm can establish itself as a thought leader in the industry. The firm's podcast episodes can delve into topics like sustainable design, which we do at Gable Media, innovative engineering solutions, which we do at Gable Media, new construction technologies, you get the point, and project management insights. Just think about the ability to share all of those on a regular basis. And then, the most important aspect of this when it comes to enhanced thought leadership and brand positioning is that you're able to consistently share these expert insights and innovative ideas, which help to elevate the firm's reputation and help it stand out among your competitors. What's the one thing that we're all trying to do with our brands is we're trying to separate ourselves from everybody else so that we are one of one, right? Your design firm should be one of one. And so to me, being a part of a creating a podcast and being a part of a podcast network can allow you to be one of one and gives you an opportunity to really develop in that way. And so, that's another thing to consider. So let's go on. Number 3, I want to share number 3 with you. And if you see me looking over to my right, your left, or I don't know, either way, the bottom line is I'm looking to forward some of these. But number 3 is cross promotion opportunities. So most podcast networks allow for cross promotion between shows, right? And that means that the firm's podcast can be promoted on other podcasts within the network. And this helps in gaining visibility among different yet relevant audiences who may have an interest in architecture, design, and construction topics. The other part, about cross promotion, which can also take the form of guest appearances on other podcasts within the network, where firm leaders or experts discuss their projects, experiences, and expertise. And some of those podcasts that I just showed you a few minutes ago from the Gable Media Network, they all have that cross-platform capability, right? Where you have that, I like to call it cross-pollination. So somebody from the Entree Architect podcast can be on the She Builds podcast. I know that I've been on the Entree Architect podcast, but I've also been on the Build Your Brand podcast, Context and Clarity. So I've had an opportunity to cross over, even before I joined Gable, to cross over and be on several of these different podcasts. And as a thought leader, I'm able to share my brand and to help them extend their brand into different areas. And so that's one of the benefits of being a part of a podcast network, is that cross promotion opportunity. So let's look at number 4. 4 is access to professional production and marketing support. Now, a lot of people that I talk to when we talk about podcasts, they always have a concern and or a worry that, well, I just don't know if my podcast is going to sound right. I don't know if it's going to sound good. And this is your chance to be a part of a network and get help from other people. I'm a part of several networks that do what I'm doing right now, live streaming, podcasting. I'm part of the Ecamm Live network. I'm part of a network for Descript, which is a editor that I use. I'm part of a couple of podcast networks. I've started my own podcast network personally for what I do here in Northwest Arkansas. And then, of course, I'm part of the Gable Media podcast network with Gable Media. And so there are tremendous benefits to that, to accessing professional production and marketing support when you get in a network, right? It's the community. It's what I'm trying to build here with you guys, is a community of like-minded people, of podcasters, of design professionals that want to continue to extend their brand beyond where it currently is being extended right now. So when you think of this, access to professional production and marketing support, podcast networks often provide access to professional production, editing, marketing teams, ensuring that the content is high quality and professionally presented. This support can save time and resources for the firm while still delivering top-notch content. Now, the translation to that is continue doing the amazing design work that you're doing and serving the needs of your clients. But when you work with a company like Gable, they can kind of help you. We can kind of help you. Just make sure that when you do enter the world from a podcasting perspective, everything sounds tight. It all sounds good. So keep that in mind as we're doing this process. And as you're thinking about, why should I even consider A, doing a podcast, B, joining a podcast network? I'm hoping to make my case with this information. Final thing under access to professional production and marketing support is that the network's marketing team can also assist with social media promotion, press releases, and email marketing, expanding the podcast's reach beyond its initial listener base. So let's say you're a design firm up in Rochester, New York, and you've got a small audience of listeners in that market there in upstate New York. But you want to maybe expand some of the things that you're doing because of the type of work that you do. And the type of work that you do, the type of design work that you do has applications across the country. Well, there are ways to cross promote that and to share that information by accessing a larger network than the network that you currently have. That's another benefit of a podcast network. And so we can help you with that at Gable Media, and we can show you how to leverage a network, this network, or any network for that matter, that may give you more of an opportunity to extend your brand and to get it out there to a larger audience. So that's number 4, access to professional production and marketing support. Let's talk a little bit about money, right? Because that's something that everybody wants to know about. How am I going to pay for this? What's it going to look like, Randy? I don't think we can afford it. We don't have a line item. Listen, we can find a line item in your marketing budget. I can guarantee you we can find bloat in your marketing budget. You probably already know this, right? So the idea here is let's reappropriate some of that money, some of those resources, financial or otherwise, to this whole idea or concept of storytelling through podcasting, through extending your brand and getting it out there so that the world can hear it, as well as so that you can continue to develop your team internally, right? Because like I said, I'm always going to make the case, podcasting benefits the outside world and everybody else that needs to know who you guys are, what makes you special, and what separates you from the rest of the pack. But then also it needs to benefit your internal team. You need to continue to edify everybody that walks through the front doors of your organization on a regular basis. And if you're not sure how to do that, I can show you easily how a podcast can do that. I can make a case for why doing a regular podcast just for your team internally could benefit your brand, could help you grow, even if you didn't release it to the world. I've done that with firms. And so there are a lot of benefits to that. But we're talking about podcast networking here, and I don't want to lose that part of it. And so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. But when you think about monetization opportunities, if your podcast were to gain traction, there might be opportunities for monetization through sponsorships, through advertisements, which can help offset the cost of production or even generate additional revenue. Who knows? We've got clients at Gable Media that created podcasts that are now generating revenue from those podcasts. Being a part of a network with established relationships with advertisers can lead to more lucrative sponsorship deals tailored to the firm's niche and expertise. Is it niche? It's niche. Niche. I always say niche. Some people say niche. It's niche. I'm going to say niche. Tailored to the firm's niche and expertise. Now, I will say this. Gable Media works with a number of advertisers. And one of the benefits they keep coming back to us and saying is that, listen, it's so nice being able to advertise on all of the different shows on your platform because you have a wide variety of listeners. And we're going to kind of go through that in a second. But again, that's the power of a podcast network. And when you have a strong podcast network, the monetization opportunities kind of come hand in hand with that. So I want you to keep that in mind. Now let's look at number 6 because we're almost done. Number 6 is simply this: networking and collaboration. When you're part of a podcast network, you can open up new networking and collaboration opportunities. Your firm can connect with other podcasters, industry leaders, and influencers, potentially leading to joint ventures, partnerships, or speaking opportunities at industry events. I'm thinking AIA, I'm thinking ACEC, I'm thinking NSBE. I mean, you fill in the blank. There's so many different organizations that you could go out and be an influencer for and extend your brand to. The other thing that with regard to a podcasting network from a networking collaboration standpoint is the simple fact that it creates a community where the firm can exchange ideas, trends that you're seeing in the marketplace, and innovations with other like-minded professionals. This just further enhances your strategic positioning in the AEC space. Okay. Let me say that one more time. If you decide to become a part of a podcast network and you develop a podcast, you will be in a position to create a community where your firm can exchange ideas, trends, innovations that you're experiencing in the marketplace with a lot of other professionals that are out there. And this will help to further enhance your strategic positioning in the AEC space. I could see design professionals seeing the work that you're doing and get excited about saying, hey, I want to be a part of what this organization's all about. I mean, I can make an argument all day long for why every firm should have a podcast, if for no other reason, but for this reason of networking and collaboration and what it means. All you need to do is network with the right person. I tell my kids all the time, it's all about relationships, who you're connected to, and how those relationships, how you develop those relationships. And of course, it's a two-way street, right? It's not a transactional thing. It's a relational thing. So, you have to think of it from that perspective. If you go out and push great ideas out into the world has a way of responding back in kind. So I just want you to keep that in mind. All right. Number 7. The number 7 idea or thing here is boosted SEO and digital presence. I think this is just a simple byproduct of being part of a podcast network. Podcast networks often have websites with strong SEO, which is search engine optimization, and being featured or linked on these sites can improve your AEC firm's digital footprint. And this certainly leads to better search engine rankings and increased visibility for the firm's content. And additionally, the podcast network can provide a platform for repurposing podcast content into blogs, articles, videos, further boosting your digital marketing efforts. If your marketing people are like, we just don't have enough content, I can show you how doing a couple of podcast episodes can give you more than enough content that you could take to the cows come home and use it. Now, if you do audio only, that's going to give you a certain amount of content. If you do video first, you can pull out the audio and use it. You can use video, obviously. You can create videograms. You can create audiograms. There are a million things you could create. Courses. There's a number of things that can be done. And that's one of the benefits of specifically of a podcast network, is that you're able to quickly add gas to your SEO and digital presence. And it will make a gas in a good way. And it will make a huge difference. All right. So I'm going to land this plane now. I'm going to go over and talk about number 8, which is consistency and reliability. All right. A podcast network can offer consistency in release schedules and content quality, which is crucial, really, when you think about it, for maintaining audience trust and engagement. This consistency can be difficult for firms to achieve on their own due to time and resource constraints. And so when you have a podcast network, just think it's just other people around you that are constantly saying, hey, you can do it. You've got this. Oh man, what a great episode. Oh, wow. Here's some ways that you can get this out there to the world. Here's how you might want to promote it. Here's how you might want to do this. This is a great commercial that you can put up against that particular episode that we think you'll really benefit from. Here's an audience that we think this episode's going to be good for. We think your podcast is going to be good for. That's one of the benefits of offering and being a part of a podcast network, is that it will give you that consistency and reliability that you normally can't achieve on your own. And then finally, you get to create regular content under the network's banner, which gives you some credibility and authority to the voice that your firm has in the marketplace, right? And just imagine being able to say, oh, yeah, I'm part of the Gable Media network, or I'm part of the HubSpot network, or I'm part of the fill in the blank network. It does have presence. I know whenever I see a brand new podcast that's now part of the HubSpot podcast network, I listen to it. And I always want to see what's going on with that episode. What are they talking about? I love the fact that they promote each other's podcasts. That's the other thing, is when you become part of a podcast network, especially at Gable Media, we promote other podcasts that are on the podcast network. So we don't just say, oh, well, Mark LePage doesn't just say, well, the Entree Architect podcast, that's the only thing I'm focused on. No, he promotes Detailed. He promotes Design Vault, Build Smart, Context and Clarity. All of these get promoted through the podcast network. So these are tremendous benefits. And so finally, as I land this plane, I want you to be thinking about this. Well, actually, I'm going to say one more thing. Another benefit of being part of a podcast network is the fact that networks often provide access to listener data and insights, which can help the firm better understand its audience and refine its content strategy. And certainly, all of those insights are also valuable for tailoring marketing efforts and improving client outreach. I mean, just think of how big of a difference it made. And you heard me say right at the beginning that the Gable Media Network, 100 plus countries, our podcasts have played in, 3 million plus downloads. And I'm just stop at that. That's enough right there. I mean, it makes a huge difference in the design industry space. So it's a niche within a niche, right? When you think of all the design industry professionals that are out there, I want to say in my recruiting days, I used to say there was about 1.6 or 1.7 million design professionals, twice that number from a construction side. So, just think about that and just think about the difference that it can make. And so finally, just thinking about a podcast network, being a part of a podcast network really gives you the ability to, it can help your design firm. It can help it with its influence. It can help you connect with key stakeholders in the markets that you serve. And it certainly can just as an overall aspect, when you're part of a good, strong podcast network, it can help you enhance the overall business development strategy through high quality content and strategic marketing. And so those are some of the things that really stand out when it comes to being a part of a podcast network. And I won't say I'll stake my career on it, but the bottom line is I feel very strongly about that, right? And I feel very strongly that it's something that you really need to be considering, especially if you decide to start a podcast. Definitely start a podcast. Let's get it off the ground. We can help you with that. But even if you just, have some questions, I'm happy to answer those questions for you and, whatever I can share. And then more importantly, I want to encourage you to be thinking about, if you decide to create a podcast, find a podcast network home, a place where you can get the help that you need to really grow and extend your brand. Now, I wouldn't say effortlessly, but it's as close to effortlessly as possible. So I really want to encourage you to be thinking about that as we move forward and as I share more and more content in these live streams. And now I know this one may not be live, but I will post this video after the fact and we'll make sure that we get it out there. But I just want to make sure that you have this information and that you have access to it, because it does make a difference. And I think you can really benefit from it. The other thing that I will say, this is just getting back to kind of where we are with, the brand and you think of Gable Media. If you think of what we do with our programs here, you've got all these different podcasts, some that haven't been there hasn't been a recording in a couple of years. And then there are others that have new episodes every week, right? But they're all part of one network. And so if any of the ones that haven't been recorded recently decided they wanted to pick up and re-record or start recording again or start a new season, they can do that because they're part of a network, and it's easy to kind of flip that switch on and hit record. And so when you think of like what is being done through Emerging and Entree Architect podcast, which, Mark's probably got 400 or 500 or 600 episodes. She Builds podcast, a podcast that talks about women in history in the design industry, which is an amazing topic when you think of it. It's like, that's a one-of-one podcast. There aren't many podcasts out there that are focusing on people like Denise Scott Brown and other design leaders, women, Zaha Hadid and others that have made their mark and press their thumbprint into the design or into the built environment. And so, you have all these different podcasts that cover a lot of different things, hidden in plain sight, uncovering the career of Black architects, really interesting podcast. The Spaces podcast that Demetrius Lynch puts out and the content that he's talking about. There's just so much that's available and you can learn about it. If you visit gablemedia.com, you can gain additional insight and information by putting your email address in here. But more importantly, just listen to some of these podcasts to get an idea. RCAT, one of our clients, has the Detailed podcast. Every building does have a story, right? And so if you think about what these guys are able to do, I'd highly recommend that you give it a whirl and take a closer look at what a podcast network looks like and why we keep talking about it. I will talk about this till the cows come home. I'll talk about podcasting till the cows come home, but I really want to make a case for why you might want to consider a podcast network. And so again, in the interest of time, I've gone 30 minutes just talking about a podcast network and the power of it. But I hope I can, make a case for you to why you want to consider it. But more importantly, not to even get ahead of myself, why you want to consider doing a podcast in the first place. And even if you are not quite ready to do a podcast, maybe you should consider advertising on a podcast network like Gable, because it would give you exposure to a larger audience that maybe your brand needs exposure to. I'm sure you've got some interesting things that you're working on, and there would be some creative ways that we could create some content for you and create a commercial that you could share with our audience of 200,000 plus regular listeners to our podcast. So that's not a lifetime number. That is a regular number. We have a regular number of listeners. And when you think of the number of design professionals that exist, period, that's a nice chunk of design professionals that are out there, especially those that are in a decision-making position, are in a position to, really, make a difference in terms of how and who they do work with and the projects that they do. So anyway, I think I've made my case. I've made it abundantly clear. I'm so sorry if this did not show up as a live stream the way I had intended it to. First of all, I had some problems with my mic, but hopefully you guys are hearing me fine now. And then the other thing was just had some technical issues, and these things happen from time to time. And that's the long and short of it. But you know what? I always press record because I just can't worry about it. And so you'll see me right back here next week doing the same thing. So next week I'll be here. The week after I will be out of town at the Elevate AEC conference. Shout out to Zoe Group and the amazing work that they're doing in the design industry space, how they serve design firms so well in the same way that Entre Architect does, in the same way that Gable Media is doing. There's just a lot of firms out there that really eat, sleep, and drink AEC, right? And so as my friend Chad Kleinens always likes to say, and I've heard others say it, and of course John F. Kennedy said it, a rising tide lifts all ships. So as I go, you go. And as you go, hey, maybe I can go, right? So let's rise, let's all rise together. And especially if we can do it from the vantage point of telling our stories more often, if we can do it from the vantage point of getting out there and creating podcasts, becoming part of podcast networks, leveraging the listeners and the demographic that's out there that's taking in this amazing content on a daily basis. So I'm Randy Wilburn, Director of Business Development for Gable Media. I'm excited to share this topic with you. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me some feedback. You can hit me up down below, or you can DM me. If there's something you didn't like, let me know. Try it the next time. If it's not something that I can fix, then well, c'est la vie. But regardless, I hope you have an amazing day. Continue to do amazing things, because remember, as I always tell every design firm, every design professional that I run across, you are responsible for the built environment. What you do matters. Do it well. Do it consistently. Tell the world about it. I'm Randy Wilburn. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Let me know how this mic says. Does it sound okay? Because if so, I'm going to be using this Shure MV7. I'm going to do an episode talking about equipment. So if you want to do your own podcast, I'm going to do an episode about that. Okay, I'm done. I'll see you later. Bye.